Hello, welcome everyone. This is Mohammed Tuhami from Midway Simplicity, and welcome to a new episode of the Midway Simplicity Show, where I invite simple living advocates to share with you a few tips that are not too hard for your lifestyle and that can help you simplify the 5 most important areas of your life, which are time, health, things, finances, and relationships. And today I am with Joel Zaslofsky. Joel Zaslofsky. He is the papa of Grant, his lively and cool 2-year-old son, and hubby of Melinda, a wonderful woman who has been hanging around with him for over 13 years. What a successful marriage, I believe. And he cranks out value to the world from the comfort of his home office, and specifically from his website Value of Simple, where he has a very interesting podcast called the Smart and Simple Matters Show, and he also do a lot of YouTube videos, and he primarily talks about simplicity, getting and staying organized, personal finances, and understanding the motivations that drive everything we do. But he also sometimes he branch off into other topics from time to time, but this is the core of his blog Value of Simple. So welcome, Joel.
Thank you very much, Tahami. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today and to be able to chat about a whole bunch of things that you and I are both very passionate about. And hopefully the folks who are watching this show, after they're done, they'll say, wow, those two guys had a pretty interesting chat, and I can take some action and I can do something with it. So Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's start by your story. How did you get all that started, the Value of Simple blog, and your interest or passion for the topic of simplicity?
Sure. Well, it was a bit of a long journey, at least as far as journeys go for me. I started about 2.5 years ago. My wife, Melinda, who you mentioned, one day, and this wasn't a surprise, she walked up to me and she had this enormous smile on her face and she said, "I'm pregnant," with our now almost 2-year-old son, Grant. And like I said, we were trying to have our first child, and this was wonderful news and certainly not surprising, but it was at that moment where I thought to myself, you know, I haven't done, for 3 decades of my life, I'm 33 years old now, I haven't really done anything that I can hang my hat on when all is said and done, or anything that I can have a legacy outside of my family and maybe my neighbors and some friends. And I started to reevaluate everything. I call it a personal renaissance that I went through at that point in time, and it was instant. Just at that point where my wife told me I'm pregnant. And I started to explore simplicity and minimalism in blogs and in books and videos, and try to figure out, how do I want to prioritize my life? What are the things that are truly important to me? What are all the things that are holding me back and that are not allowing me to realize my potential and my ability to help all the other people who are important in my life? So it was this gradual progression over 1.5 years or so after my wife told me I'm pregnant. And at that point, and as we went through this progression, I decided that I wanted to quit my corporate job. I worked in corporate America in the financial industry for over a decade in a number of different roles, all of which I won't tell you about now because they're not super interesting. But the point was, although I was generating value to the people within my company and the people who interacted with my company, it wasn't the kind of value that I wanted to generate. I wanted to generate the kind of value that had direct impact on not just the people who I could physically be with or interact with, but anybody who would come across a message or an idea or text or audio or video. And so I created a website that no longer exists called Enlightened Resource Management, which was the predecessor to Value of Simple. And a few months ago, I realized that that wasn't really what I wanted to do and the approach that I wanted to take. So I went through a period of time. I completely put down in this giant mind map. You should see it someday. It's crazy. What are all the things that I'm passionate about and that I feel like I can help people, that I can add value to people's lives? And those were simplifying, organizing personal finance, and then explaining the reason, the purpose behind why we do everything that we do. So that's the nutshell version of getting up to Value Simple. But I've been doing it for a few months now, and it's been wonderful. I really dig it.
Awesome, awesome. So let's begin by your first tip on how to simplify your time.
Sure. Well, I had a couple of tips, but I'll stick with one, and maybe that'll blend into two. I guess my primary tip for time is a lot of people that I see, some people that I interact with, they talk about a whole bunch of hacks or tricks to squeeze more time out of their day. And some of those are appropriate depending on who you are and what the context is. But some people need to realize, myself included at times, that none of us can fit 10 pounds into a 5-pound sack. And by that I mean there's 24 hours in a day, or there's 168 hours in a week, and you don't get more than that. But a lot of people try to squeeze so much into the time that we're allotted, and I can't tell anybody, don't bother trying. It's not my point, or it's not my position in life to tell somebody, do this or don't do that. But I will say this, sleep is just about the best thing that you can do with your time. And there really isn't anything such as too much sleep. So for all of the people who think that they can do just fine for months or years on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, I believe that when that happens, we create this massive sleep deficit that we can't really overcome. And ultimately, it's going to affect your health and your relationship, your finances, and every other aspect of your life. So, except in very rare circumstances, nothing is as important as getting sleep. And although you're not actually doing anything during that time when you're sleeping, it's just about the best time well spent.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting tip. So let's move on to health, which I believe somehow related to the first tip. But do you have something special for simplifying health, improving health?
Yeah, well, I'll tell people what works for me. You know, part of my personal renaissance and reevaluating every aspect of my life was reevaluating food and exercise and nutrition. And I'm part of a community called Paleo or Primal. Some people may have heard of the caveman diet. Basically, you view things through the lens of evolutionary biology and try to figure out, if my ancestors 20,000 years ago were healthy and they had success doing certain things by living a certain way, getting a certain amount of sleep, exposing themselves to sunlight for a certain period of time, eating certain types of foods, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I should try to do it too. So from my personal perspective, paleo is a lifestyle. It's not just exercise, it's not just eating, but by adopting that, I've really been able to simplify things to an incredible extent. Before, it was going through a pantry and trying to figure out for food, which of these 200 ingredients should I combine together and turn into a meal. Now that I've intentionally restricted the types of food that I eat, it's a lot easier for me to determine and still have really tasty stuff, what kind of food I should eat. Or I've eliminated the potential for doing a lot of different types of exercise, which I don't feel are right for me and my body. And so it's a matter of just picking between a simple set of push-ups or pull-ups or squats, viewing things through this lens, through this paleo lens, and how we as humans have evolved has really helped me tremendously. And although other people get to find their own way that they can benefit from a healthy lifestyle, adopting this paleo mindset and philosophy has helped my health tremendously and really allowed me to practice the simple lifestyle that I want to believe that I'm leading.
Interesting, interesting. Your life is full of interesting stuff, and I believe we will talk about something very interesting at the end. So, but before that, let's move on to the third area, which is things, possessions.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a very wide category of things. I love it, by the way, Tohami, that things is one of your 5 things that we talk about here. Honestly, I don't really have a problem with things. And I think that a lot of people can successfully have a bunch of physical and digital, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever kind of things they want to have in their life. We can have that, and we can have a rich life with a whole bunch of things. But it's trying to figure out, when does that tip into a form of chaos? when does that become disruptive to our life? How do we keep a level of things, or heck, I mean, even try to add to them and see if the addition of something physical or something digital or adding a spiritual ritual or practice into our life, when does it create a tipping point where we start to head down a chaotic route? I will mention this, though. A lot of people focus on decluttering, and I know that that's a big buzzword. And the act of removing all these non-essential or useless parts of your life, that's really important. But having all these things is fine as long as it's not creating chaos and you can identify it yourself if it is, or other people can point it out for you. The worst thing you can do is either maintain the same number of things that you have in all these different facets, like I said, mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual, physical, digital, and not have them actually do anything good for you. So this is where self-awareness comes in, and having the courage to ask other people too, do you think I have too many things? And if so, how can I remove some of them to add value to my life instead of taking them away? Hope that made sense.
Yeah. So it's all about value. If this thing that I own adds value to my life, then let's keep it. If it's not, then let's figure out a way to just eliminate it from our life. So that's what you were saying. No?
Yeah, and that takes a whole bunch of different forms. Not just is it on my desk or is it my kid's toy in the background over here. How is this adding value, and to who is this adding value to? And if those things are, remove them and see how your life is. If it improves, great. If you need to add it back, do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now let's move to finances, an area that is a hot area for many people. So what's your take on that?
Well, I read your great article last week, your tips of the week, and what I'm going to say is going to directly contradict your tip. So my apologies.
Feel free. It's totally free.
Well, I'm glad that we can disagree on a couple things here.
Yeah, definitely.
You pay in cash, pay in cash, pay in cash.
Yes.
For some people, that works.
Yeah.
What I would tell people, at least those who are somewhat technologically savvy, do not pay in cash. You don't have to pay with everything with a credit card, especially if you have debt issues, which I know a lot of people do. But spending your money digitally or electronically, if possible, makes it 100 times easier to track your spending, to find bad patterns in your financial habits. And for people who are responsible with their money and with their personal finances, not paying in cash, using credit cards, there are a lot of rewards that you can get from them, both in terms of the convenience and the literal rewards, whether it's cash back or airline miles. There's a tremendous amount of benefits beyond any rewards that you physically get from using electronic forms of payment. So I would tell folks, if you don't have debt issues, if you have confidence in a method of tracking your spending, do something electronic and track that activity. Look for those patterns, look for those bad habits, look for the excess in your spending that doesn't need to be there. And again, as you're talking about, and as I'm talking about, that's not adding value. That's not adding richness or depth to your life. And by doing things that way, you can have a greater awareness and you can figure out, where are my blind spots? How are my spending patterns changing over time? And I really like having the ability to do that.
Yeah, as you said, it's all about tracking your spending. If you are going to pay online using credit card, then you need to be very much aware of your spendings so that you can pay before you start to acquire interest rate on your payments. And also, when you use the credit card, you need to know your limits and that you will have the cash to cover that in the future and so on. So if you are aware of your spendings and you track them in a proper way, then there is no problem with using credit cards. But if you just use them to pay for things that you actually cannot afford in cash, then this will be the problem.
Right. Yeah. Completely agree.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's move to relationships. And you are married for 13 years.
Well,
So you must have some tips to help us simplify our relationships with our beloved ones.
well, fortunately, Melinda and I have a wonderful relationship. We've been together for 13 years. We've been married for 7. We just had our anniversary back on September 10th,
Wow.
and a
This
really good one.
is still impressive.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We've been happily engaged with each other for over 13 years when we met in college our sophomore year, and it's been wonderful. I give her so much credit. I was telling my story, and the fact that I'm able to do what I do in terms of trying to add value to other people's lives through Value of Simple, most of it goes to the credit goes to Melinda. She's been my emotional support. She's been the financial support through this transition. But people aren't watching us and listening to us hear me talk about how much I love my wife, which I love her tremendously. From a relationship perspective, as I went through my personal renaissance and I simplified my relationships, and I'll explain that in just a moment, I realized that I had a lot more time and energy both for my existing relationships and for my new relationships. And the ability to, I've heard other people, Courtney Carver from Be More with Less, talk about being fully engaged, giving somebody your full attention, both physically if you're in a room with them or mentally, the ability to commit fully to a relationship. By all of these things that I've done to simplify my life, I've generated a lot of additional time and energy where I can explore new relationships and I can add them without the other ones having to suffer as a result of it. And I've intentionally freed myself a lot of the relationships that held me back. It was painful. There are friends who I no longer interact with because there was a level of toxicity in the relationship, or it really wasn't helping them or it wasn't helping me. So I guess what I tell people is the more you simplify, the more that you really try to, and you're honest with yourself and with the other people, if you can remove the relationships that don't benefit anyone, especially yourself, you'll have a lot of additional time and energy to spend with the people who you currently love, who you currently care about, and the bonus is you have the ability to generate fun, wonderful new relationships with a whole bunch of cool people who are doing things online, in your local community, wherever that may happen to be. So really focus and fully engage with the relationships that you have. And if you question whether you can do that or whether you should do that with a specific person or a certain group of people, maybe that's a sign that you should tweak that relationship and try to generate the value somewhere else.
Wow, that's interesting. And now to the very interesting part that we would like to discuss before we conclude this call, which is your unbelievable challenge that you call the Continuous Creation Challenge. So can you tell people how did you initially do that and what was the latest version of it, and then if you can tell them the midway version of this radical challenge.
Sure. I'd love to. You're right. The Continuous Creation Challenge that you referred to can be a little bit out there, a little bit crazy, and a little bit radical for some folks. Just for a little bit of context, I did this back in April of 2012. Yeah, back in April, I spent 72 hours completely eliminating consumption the way that I defined it. And everybody gets to define consumption the way that they want for the Continuous Creation Challenge. But to me, that meant no food. I still drank water. No reading of any kind. No watching anything that required electricity. No running errands. No non-essential communication with various people. And the purpose of that, of eliminating all these various forms of consumption, was so that I could have a period where I was creating. So much of my life was spent consuming, and I wasn't creating enough. I wasn't adding value to other people's lives. So I took this 72-hour period of time where all I did was create or sleep. Those were my two options. And when I was done creating, then it was time to sleep.
So
More
it's
recently,
72 hours without food and without sleep. Wow.
no, definitely sleep.
Okay.
I sleep in that period of
So
time.
it's without food mainly. That's not the main thing.
That's one of the criteria. The great thing about the Continuous Creation Challenge is that I've created a framework, a blueprint for people to explore, and they can tweak it and customize it and personalize it as much as they like. And the goal is to revive that sense that we had as children when life was about creating or adding value to others. So much of our adult lives is spent consuming, reading and watching and eating and doing a lot of things, sometimes things that we need to do, other things that are in excess of what we want to do. So this creation, this continuous creation challenge that I have that people can explore on my website, Value Simple.
And where they can get that blueprint that you just mentioned?
I'll be adding more resources to it. Most recently, I, along with a number of other folks in the community, did a 120-hour continuous creation challenge.
Wow. So you have a kind of like an ebook or a special report where you lay out this blueprint, or where can people find the how to do it?
Yeah, they can go to Value Simple, and they can go to a specific page that I have dedicated to the Continuous Creation Challenge.
Okay.
I will say,
yeah. Send me the link and I can add it below the video on the blog, I believe.
Sure.
Unless you have a small link that you can share now.
No, I'll send it to you and you can add it to the show notes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully that's sufficient. I don't want to talk about it all day, but it's exciting. It's
exciting, and I believe it will be the next 100 thing challenge of the next big thing, like the 100 thing challenge of Dave Bruno. So this challenge is as buzzy and as radical and as catchy as the 100 thing challenge of Dave Bruno. So I will try it on my own way, maybe for 12 hours as a start. And then I can increase that as I proceed, because as you said, it's good to start with a small experiment and see the impact and value of it on your life, and then you can expand. So
there's definitely a midway way to do the Continuous Creation Challenge. It doesn't have to be radical. It doesn't have to freak people out.
Yeah.
You should customize it and do the things that make sense to you, but understand the reason why. If you can't define, or you don't have a good reason why you would want to do it, then don't do it. It's not for everybody, but there is definitely a midway way to customize it and personalize it so that not only is it rewarding, but you're very proud of the accomplishments that you have during the period of time.
That's great, and I think you should consider writing a book about this concept, because it will take the world by storm, I believe.
Well, that's not my intention. If it does, I'd be pleased. But yeah, there will be more resources surrounding this. The things I really love.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being my guest today, and I look forward to having another call that's more in-depth on specific issues that you are the guru in.
Wonderful. Thanks a ton.
Thank you so
again
much
for having me on the show, Tahami. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.